from page 10 over here. So, Erev Tov, once again, we're in Mishkanot Shananim. We are, as usual, learning for the Hatzlacha in general of all of Am Yisrael, specifically the Menucha, for the Menucha of Sir Moses Montefiore and Sir Naim Dangur. We're once again in Mishkanot Shananim. Rib Ira asked us, since we already were Mevarech Chodesh Av this last Shabbat, and we'll be having Chodesh Av itself this coming Shabbat, specifically to go into what ramifications, what should we be aware of as this month begins. Presumably in other times we'd be within the scope of Tosefet Shvi'it in certain senses. Some would say, fortunately, we don't have a Beit Mikdash. Chalila to say such a thing. Bezrat Hashem, we have Beit Mikdash, we're davening for that. But unfortunately, we don't. As long as we don't have a Beit Mikdash, we will not be keeping Tosefet Shvi'it. But we're going to see that there are other things we need to be aware of before Shmita, even without Beit Mikdash. And we're going to start that. That starts on page 10 of Unit 3. The beginning of Unit 3 goes into the whole background of what I said. Page 10 and on goes into what is left, what else is still relevant out of Shmita. It starts from a Mishnah that we've seen very briefly for a different reason. The Mishnah in Perek Mishnah Vav, Ein Not'in, Ve'ein Mavrichin, Ve'ein Markivin. These are three methods making a tree take root in land or in a different tree, etc. Not going to go into the details, but as far as we're concerned, the main point is planting. Erev Shvi'it, Chod Mishloshim Yom Lifnei Rosh Hashanah. The Yaakov we already discussed in the Gemara in Gittin, that why you need to uproot a tree. We're going to go deeper into that question now. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Kol Kavash ina koletet l'shosha yamim shuv ina koletet. So Rabbi Yehuda cites 3 days. We're going to see what that means in a moment. Rabbi Yosef Rabbi Shimon omrim l'shtei Shabbatot. The Gemara explains that what this means is Amar Rav Nachman, Amar Rabba bar Avuha, L'divrei Omer 30 tzarich 30 u'shloshim. This is page 11 already. You need 30 additional days, right? Tanakama here who says 30 days, he means 30 apart from something. Not so clear what at this point. All right. L'divrei Omer shlosha, right? Rabbi Yehuda says 3 days. Tzarich 30 u'shloshim. L'divrei Omer shtei Shabbatot, tzarich 2 Shabbatot u'shloshim yom, which would bring us to Tedzayin Av. Why is this? So Rashi writes, L'divrei Omer 30 yom liklita, tzarich 30 u'shloshim, 30 liklita, 30 letosefet. Rabbi Eliezer, last week we talked about this idea that Rav Moshe Feinstein took this to the next step. That Rabbi Eliezer holds that Rosh Chodesh Elul is the beginning of the Shemitah year, as far as Tosefet Shvi'it is concerned, and as far as the Shemitah is concerned. Shemitah does not start in the 7th year; it starts Rosh Chodesh Elul of the 6th year. Slightly different ramifications between Rosh Chodesh Elul and Rosh Chodesh Tishrei, but very slightly different, as Rav Moshe explained. I'm not going to go back in that whole explanation. What's important to us right now is that Rashi is saying, why do you need to start 30 days before, or 33 days before, or 44 days before? To ensure that the tree doesn't take root during the Tosefet. So 30 days until it's niklat, right, until the roots are sufficiently become part of the land. 30 additional days are required as Tosefet Shvi'it, because this means from Rosh Chodesh Elul, you're not allowed to cause root to be taken, right? So also, you need to start early enough before Rosh Chodesh Elul to ensure that it doesn't happen from Rosh Chodesh Elul or not. Now I'll ask, in that case, what happens nowadays that we don't have Tosefet Shvi'it? The machloket would take one step down, right? In other words, when the Gemara said, when Rav Nachman Amar bar Avuha, the way Rashi is reading Rav Nachman Amar bar Avuha, he says, these 3 opinions are the opinions regarding how long it takes a tree to take root. But you need 30 additional days because of Tosefet Shvi'it. Question, what happens in the world where you don't have Tosefet Shvi'it? In that world, you'd only require 30 days, 3 days, and 2 weeks. right? You see how this works? It's the Mishnah says that has a machloket, 30 days, 3 days, or 2 weeks. How long the plant takes to take root? You're not allowed, says Rashi, you have to avoid the plant taking root during Shmita, or you causing that, right? So even if you planted 3 weeks before Shmita, they'll take root on Shmita. A month later, according to Tanakama, according to Rabbi Yossi and Rabbi Shimon, you're fine. Says Rav Nachman, the truth is, this doesn't start from Rosh Chodesh Tishrei, it starts from Rosh Chodesh Elul, because Tosefet Shvit, explains Rashi, and as far as we're concerned, since Tosefet Shvit has been cancelled, as we're going to learn probably next week, probably once again for Mishkan Shananim. So since it's been cancelled, we would say that nowadays, according to Rashi, you'd have to start either Rosh Chodesh, stop planting either Rosh Chodesh Elul, Tet Zayin Elul, or Kaf Zayin Elul. That's Rashi's opinion. Let's have a look at the Ritva. The Ritva says, Rashi Piresh kan asur lekaman b'shvid mishum tosefet shvit. תוספת שביעית מהתורה אינו אלא 30 יום, על פי שחכמים הוסיפו עם פסח מעצרת, אני מלכתחילה, אבל בדיעבד לא יעקור, כשנתן תוך 30 יום שהוא תוספת דאורייתא. I'm reading it fast because this is what we spent the whole time last week going over. Right? Last week we went over this idea that the Tosefet Midoraita, according to Rabbi Ishmael, starts on Rosh Chodesh Elul. Then Chachamim added the whole idea that Charish is Charish that prepares for Shvi'it, even though Rabbi Ishmael doesn't hold that opinion. But that's a Drabanan layer. Says Rabbeinu Tam, לא אסרה תורה משום תוספת שביעית אלא עבודה שהיא מועילה לשביעית. כגון חרישה, תלקח בהה ליקה לא מדאורייתא ולא מדרבנן. שאף חכמים שאסרו בחרישה בשדה לבן מן פסח ובשדה אילן מן העצרת יישארו חכמים דבהך אפשר דמענה בשביעית. I'm not going to go into all the details, but I don't know if you remember, we said that when it comes to planting trees, when does the tree become relevant? When does the planting of the tree become something that's useful, right? The tree becomes useful only a couple of years later, 5 years later, right? Within the first few years, the tree isn't really useful, right? You can't really use the tree that first year. First of all, it's young. It's not going to give you too much. And even what it does give, it'll be orla. You can't really benefit from that tree anyway, right? So, says that's why, if you remember in the previous unit, Rabbeinu Tam says there's no Isur of planting during Tosefet Shvi'it. Here, once again, we're confronted with the machloket. There was Rabbeinu Tam and the Rash, Rabbeinu Shimshon Mishans. Here it's Rabbeinu Tam and Rashi, right? That Rashi says Tosefet Shvi'it, the Isur of Tosefet Shvi'it includes the Isur of causing the tree to get planted, to take root during the Tosefet. Rabbeinu Tam says, Ma pitom, no such thing. Rabbeinu Tam says, never heard of such a thing. There's no problem during Tosefet Shvi'it to cause such a thing because it's not relevant. Because it won't benefit the 7th years. The only things that are asur during Tosefet Shvi'it are things that will benefit the harvesting during the Shvi'it, the Shvi'it's crops. You're not going to get any more crop from trees you plant 2 months before Shmita, or a month before Shmita, and definitely not 2 weeks before Shmita, because none of the fruit will be edible that first year. Halachically or technically, it's not a relevant thing. It's not like plowing. It's not like doing other things that prepare the land and prepare vegetation. And that's why Rabbeinu Tam and the Ritva, Ramban, all reject Rashi's opinion. So Rashi, I just want to remind us, Rashi explains, the Mishnah says 3 opinions, 30 days, 3 days, 2 weeks. Says the Gemara, says Rav Nachman, we mean 30 days, 3 days, or 2 weeks before Tosefet Shvi'it, says Rashi. Rabbeinu Tam, Ritva, Ramban, they all reject this and say it can't be. There's no Tosefet Shvi'it does not apply to planting trees. It can apply to planting other things. Planting vegetables. It won't apply to planting trees. Umimele, you have to explain Rav Nachman or Ravua differently. And you say 30 additional days. Why? So says the Ritva like this. Meaning the questions of basically what's going on here, right? The time of the Pachod Mishloshim Yom Asur Lekaimai no midin Tosefet. as we said, it's not תוספת. כיוון שכן, הרי נמנית שנה ראשונה לזה שנת השביעית. וישראל מונים שנותיהם לשביעית. והיום המחר, כשימנו לזו שנה ראשונה משביעית, ירננועם לומר שנטעו ממש בשביעית. כדאמר הטה, מנותה בשבת במזיד יעקב, בשוגג יקיים. בשביעית בין בשוגג במזיד יעקב, ופריש נטע משום דמונים ישראל לשביעית, בין מונים לשבתות. כי מה שנוטע בשבת אין עולם יודעים, כי אינם מונים לימים. אבל מה שנטע בשביעית כל העולם יודעים. לכך אפילו בערב שביעית, כל אחד דלא עלתה לו שנה קודם שביעית, עיקר רינון לומר שניטע בשביעית עצמה, וכן מוכח בפירוש בירושלמי. We're going to get to this Yerushalmi shortly, but first I want to say, what is the Ritva saying? The Ritva is saying the following. When you plant a tree, are you allowed to eat fruit the following year? You're not allowed to eat fruit the following year. Why? Because you have 3 years of Orla and the 4th year of Netar Avai, and then you can start eating the fruit properly. If you're over here in Mishkan Shalanim, right across the street from the old city, you could use the Netar Avai. Otherwise, you can't. So those who are far, I apologize. Next time, come to Mishkan Shalanim. That's your message. So that's why we came here this week, to learn the sugya. So we can talk about Netar Avai. So when do you count? So if the tree takes root, says the Ritter, the tree takes root, Rosh Chodesh Elul of the 6th year, so the 7th year will be the 1st year. If it takes root before Rosh Chodesh Elul, the 1st year will not be the 7th year. Mimela, says the Ritter, what's going to happen? I plant a tree on Kaf Av. Seems legit, right? Kaf Av, good 5 weeks before, five and a bit weeks before Shmita. It's all good, right? It shouldn't be a problem. 2 years later, we say, hold on, we want to count Orla. What is this tree up to in Orla years? I say, oh, it's the 2nd year, 3rd year, right? So wait, hold on. 3rd year, that means you planted it during Shmita. You planted this tree during Shmita? Right? It sounds wrong, it sounds bad. We're going to go back to the Gemaras to look at this again. And says the Ritva, therefore, that's the Isur. The Isur is causing it to look like you planted the trees during Shmita, even though you didn't. Even though you didn't plant the trees during Shmita, you're still not allowed to make it look like that. And that's why. So, Bigadol, Rashi says the issue here is Tosefet Shvi'it. You're not allowed to make the trees take root during Tosefet Shvi'it, and that's why I have to add 30 days beyond the 2-week or 30-day periods that the Tanaim said. And the Ritva says, no, it's because any tree that takes root from Rosh Chodesh Avanon will be counted, the 7th year will be, the Shemitah will be counted as the 1st year Orla-wise. Now, there's a very big nafkamina between Rashi and the Ritva and Ramban. The nafkamina is nowadays. Because if we go by Rashi, we don't have Tosefet Shvi'it nowadays. So the only thing that's relevant nowadays would be the 3 days, 2 weeks, and a month before, right? But according to the Ritva and Ramban, I can read the Ramban in a moment. You'll see the Ramban says the same thing. The Ritva just says it more, explicates a bit more. So I prefer to put it first. But the Ramban says the same. Nothing changed because this halacha has nothing to do with Tosefet Shvi'it. The issue is not the tree taking fruit taking root during Tosefet Shvi'it. There's no problem with the tree taking root during Tosefet Shvi'it per se. The issue is simply Orla-wise. Now, this will go Lekula and Lechumra. Lekula, Lechumra, face of the opinions. Nowadays, if you don't have Tosefet Shvi'it, Rashi would say you could make it a lot more and plant either Rosh Chodesh Elul or Tetzayin Elul or even Kaf Zayin Elul, as opposed to the originally where it would be Rosh Chodesh Av, Tetzayin Av, and Kaf Zayin Av, right? The Ritva Ramban say the issue is Orla, nothing changed. So there's no Tosefet Shvi'it, it's not relevant. What about if you have a tree, what's it called? It's Srak, a tree that has no fruit, that doesn't bear fruit. Is there a word for that in English? Mm-hmm. If anyone can remember, Rabbi Yoel is usually good at these things. A tree that doesn't bear fruit, like specifically, all right, any tree that doesn't bear fruit, what do you not do when you have a tree that doesn't bear fruit? You don't count Orla years, because who cares, right? Right? Any tree that doesn't bear fruit, we don't care about the Orla because we're not looking at the fruit, right? Orla only applies to fruit. So according to Ritva and Ramban, presumably you'd be allowed also today to plant a tree, a non what during or never Rosh Hashanah, right? Because why? Because there's no Orla, because Orla is not relevant to such trees. So according to Ritva and Ramban, it's only relevant because of the fruit. According to Rashi, the additional time is relevant because of the Sefet Shvit, and that should be pushed off, right? Let's have a look at Rabbeinu Tam. I said I'll read the Ramban just so you can see the Ramban. It's a similar, but it's a good chazara. ודאי אסור ליטע ערב שביעית אלא בכדי שתקלוט ותעלה לנטיעה זו שנה קודם שביעית. You have to count the first year on the sixth year. לא משום תוספת שביעית, שאין תוספת אלא בכדי שנכנס השביעית, as רבינו תם said. אלא גזירת חכמים היא מפני שאדם מונה שנים לעורלה ולרווי, וכל ששנה ראשונה שלו שביעיתי, יאמרו בשביעית נטע. לפיכך אמור יעקור. אלא אם כן קלטה, אחר הקליטה עלתה לו שנה לנטיעה זו ב-30 או ביום אחד, כדי שתמנה שביעית שנה שנייה שלה. So that's why it has to take root before Chodesh Elul, so that you can count the full month of Elul as the sixth year, as the first year of the tree. The sixth year will be the first year of the tree, the seventh year will be the second year of the tree, then it won't look like you planted during Shmita. That's the Ramban and the Mitzvah. Says Rabbeinu Tam. בפרש רבינו תם דאחי כאמר רב נחמן, לדבר אומר 30 יום ל-30 לקליטה בשביעית, צריך 30 ו-30 לעניין עורלה. אבל לעניין שביעית לא חיישים, אלא שלא תקלוט בשביעית עצמה. ורבי יהודה דקולל ב3 ימים מותר לקיים, כיוון דלא נקלט בשביעית, אף על פי שנטעה באיסור בתוספת שביעית 3 ימים לפני ראש השנה. Rabbeinu Tam says that we're not learning Shmita here at all. This whole Mishnah here has nothing to do, not direct. It's not directly related to Shmita. He says there's no like this. He agrees with Rashi on the one hand and with the Ramban and the Ritva on the other hand. He agrees with the Ritva and the Ramban. This has nothing to do with Sevet Shvit. He agrees with the Ritva and Ramban. This has nothing to do with Sevet Shvit. It has to do with Orla. He disagrees with the Ramban and the Ritva and says, if I plant my tree before Shmita, so what if it looks like it happened during Shmita? Why is that a thing? Why is that a problem? That's basically his point. Let's look at the Gemara. Let's have a quick look at the Gemara, and you'll see how this works. The Gemara in Gittin, that's on page 12 by you. It says the Gemara the following: Gemara in Gittin Gimel, Tanya, Hanutah b'Shabbat, b'Shogeg yikayem, b'Mezid ya'aker, b'Shvit, ben b'Shogeg ben b'Mezid ya'aker, Divrei Rabbi Meir. Right. So if you transgress Shabbos, so there's a whole discussion about whether you need to uproot the tree or not. But when it comes to Shmita, it's far more clear cut that any tree planted during Shmita must be uprooted. As the Gemara, Michdi hadoraita v'adoraita. Ma'ishna Shabbat, ma'ishna Shvi'it. Why are we more machmir with Shmita? Yelahatem kedikatani tama. אמר רבי מאיר, מפני מה אני אומר בשבת בשוגג יקיים במזיד יעקר, בשביעית בין בשוגג בין במזיד יעקר? So we really have, so Rabbi Meir here, who's Machmir, explains himself. מפני שישראל מונים לשביעית ואין מונים לשבתות, דבר אחר, נחשדו ישראל על השביעית ולא נחשדו על השבתות. So he gives two reasons why is he more Machmir when it comes to Shmita. Number one, Shmita looks much worse. 6 months after the tree is planted, no one remembers what day of the week the tree was planted. Now, maybe because it happened on Shabbos, or the call, whatever, but if you want to make a fuss about it, no one will remember the tree was planted on Shabbos. But Shmita, for the next 5 years, you will remember it was planted on Shmita, because Orla will still be relevant. And that's why when it comes to Shmita, we're a lot more Machmir, which sounds very much like the Ritva and Ramban's opinion. דבר אחר, נחשדו ישראל על השביעית ולא נחשדו על השבתות. Meaning, there's a far greater concern that people don't take Shemitah as seriously as they take Shabbos. If we tell a person, Shabbos, how can you break Shabbos? So a person will not break Shabbos next time. But you don't need to uproot his tree for that. When it comes to Shmita, Shmita is rough. We talked about this in the first unit. We talked about the reasons we keep Shmita and why do we discuss at such length. So many reasons and ideas behind Shmita, and part of it really is to give chizuk and also to better understanding of this theoretical thing that really is very, very hard to keep. So hard to keep that we have to tell people Shabbos, people keep Shabbos. Many generations it was hard to keep Shabbos as well, but Jews did what Jews had to do. When it comes to Shmita, it's harder to say as much. And that's why when it comes to Shmita, we're more machmir. Now, this first idea, sounds very much like the Ritva and Ramban, right? That's exactly what the Ritva and Ramban said. They said, why are we so machmir not to plant a tree, right, within the 33 days, 44 days, 2 months before Shemitah, so don't look like it's Orla. So aren't they just saying the Pshat of the Gemara? Aren't the Ritva and Ramban simply citing the first reason brought here in the Gemara? That's just what Rabbi Meir says. Why do you have to uproot the tree? Because the tree has long-term ramifications. Shmita has long-term ramifications as opposed to Shabbos doesn't. Is that what the Gemara is saying? It is what the Gemara is saying. But what about Rashi and Rabbeinu Tam? Are they not aware of this Gemara? Not familiar with this Gemara? So, at first glance, it sounds very compelling to say, wait, so Rashi and Rabbeinu Tam are ignoring, no, thank you. Rashi and Rabbeinu Tam are ignoring the Gemara. It's a bit weird. It's very weird. They shouldn't be ignoring the Gemara. But I think we miss a certain point when we say that, because the Gemara explicitly says, Hanotah b'Shabbat as opposed to Hanotah b'Shvi'it. Question: a person plants a tree, Lam al Aleph Elul, not Aleph Av. Aleph Av this year comes out on Shabbos, and then you have a different problem. Shabbos. Aleph Elul. A person plants a tree Aleph Elul. Did he desecrate Shmita? Did he plant the tree on Shmita? If he planted on Rosh Chodesh Elul? Okay, fair point. According to Rav Moshe's reading of Rabbi Ishmael, you'd say that's already Shemitah, even though it's not a Shvi'it yet, right? Says Rashi, says Rabbeinu Tam, what does it say in this Gemara? It says, B'Shvi'it Yaakov. It doesn't say if you planted before Shvi'it Yaakov. The Ritva and Ramban are taking this reasoning of Yisrael Bonim Shvi'it and saying the same logic applies a month before too. Because if I plant a tree 2 weeks into, if I plant a tree on Erev Sukkot during Shemitah, so the next 4 years, there'll still be ramifications of that planting, right? The same thing applies a month before, 2 weeks before Shemitah as well, right? Orla applies to then, the Orla ramification would be just the same. There's no difference Orla-wise between planting 2 weeks before Rosh Hashanah or 2 weeks after Rosh Hashanah, Orla-wise. And that's why the Ritva and Ramban say it's the same thing. There's no difference between the planting 2 weeks before Shemitah to planting 2 weeks after Shemitah. Either way, you're going to have to uproot the tree. Says Rashi, there's one very simple difference. You're not allowed to plant a tree 2 weeks after Shemitah starts. You are allowed to plant a tree 2 weeks before Shemitah starts. This whole Gemara that says B'Shvit ben Shagei V'Zid Yaakov, you're right. You're right. There is an issue with Orla. Correct. The issue with Orla, and that's why you tell them to uproot the tree. But that's only if you transgress the Isur. If you're not assuming the Tosefet Shvi'it issue, if you're not assuming the taking root issue, this person never did anything wrong. Let's take Ramban and Ritva's logic. They say there's no Isur of causing the tree to take root during Shemitah. To cause taking root during Shemitah is not a problem. It's a problem only Orla-wise, but it's not a problem unto itself. So a person plants a tree 2 weeks before Rosh Hashanah of Shemitah. Did he do anything wrong? He didn't do anything wrong. Now, Ramban and Ritva say, yes, but in the long term, it's going to look like he did. To which we say, okay, it does look like he did, but he didn't. As long as he didn't, do you really impose this gzeira on him? And that's the machloket, because the Ramban Ritva say the same logic applies. There's no difference. Yeah, Sfichin, I agree. It's a fair point that there are a lot of parallels between the sugya and the sugya of sfichin. It'll take some time to get to sfichin. But yes, correct. There is a parallel machloket about if you plant the sfichin before Shmita, how does that work? It's a whole discussion we're going to get to. But we have some time till we get there, unfortunately. Now, but what's important to me at the moment is this point, that when we say, this proves our point, exactly what we said. And planting a tree in any way that look in the long term like it was planted during Shmita is the ceremonial Shvi'it. That's the Marit Ayin issue you have to uproot. Says Rashi, there's only Marit Ayin if there's a transgression of an Isur. According to your opinion, there's no Isur. What is the Isur? You ask me, Rashi, me. My Isur is the Isur of Tosavet Shvit, of causing the tree to take root during Tosavet Shvit or during Shvit itself. That's a different story. So that's the machloket how to read this Gemara. Let's get to the Yerushalmi. The Ritva cited this Yerushalmi, bottom page 12. Let's see what happens here. And Mal Biosi. Hanta b'Shabbat b'Shogeg Yekayem b'Mezid Yaakov b'Shvit ben b'Shogeg ben b'Mezid Yaakov Mata'am Rabbanan. Right? Why are we so machmir? Nechshedu al Shvit v'lo nechshedu al Shabbatot. Meaning people don't take Shmita seriously. Don't take Shmita as seriously as they take Shabbos. That's a gzeira that apply that has to do with unit 8 in Chot Shabbat. So I don't like that right now. So because you're not allowed to have hana from things that were done b'mizid on Shabbat. Yeah, benefit exactly. Yes. Right. You uproot the tree that was planted on Shabbat because you don't have to benefit from it, so you could just uproot it and plant it again on Tuesday, right? At next Shabbat. Right, because the point is you're not to benefit from any malacha that was done on Shabbos b'mezid. We're not going to go into the whole sugya there. That unit 8 in Chot Shabbat. I can go back to that. Right, that whole idea does not exist on Shvit. The idea here there is different. There's a different gzeira. It's much worse. There's a much stronger gzeira that says anything you do during Shvit that you're going to benefit from, we make sure that you can benefit from. We're a lot more machmer during Shmita. Why? One of two reasons that we see right now. One is Shabbatot, meaning people, we're not worried that if we're not gozer on Shabbos fully, people will desecrate Shabbos. We are worried when it comes to Shmita because Shmita is not taking it seriously. Which is exactly the Ritva and Ramban, the Orla issue. So, or you can say, right, Rashi and Rabbeinu Tam are following the first issue of the reason you have to uproot if it's done during Shmita. If Shmita is desecrated, then you have to uproot because of Chashad. But if Shmita is not desecrated, but not again, Chashad is not. What's it going to look like? Chashad is because we don't trust people to take it seriously. So it's just important. It's a very confusing term here. The word chashad here does not mean a person is not doing the Isur, but it looks like it is, like he is. It means we don't trust that people will take it seriously if we don't fine them strongly. So if you don't give a serious fine, people will not take this Isur seriously. That's what chashad means, okay? It's not chashad in the sense of I'm not chashad in the classic sense of do I think a person did something right or wrong? I don't know if he did something right or wrong, and I'm choshed. Not that kind of chashad. I'm choshed that if I don't throw the book at them, they won't take it seriously. I have to go full-fledged. That's Rashi, and it seems to be that Rashi and Rabbeinu Tam would follow this reason. Ramban and Ritva would follow the Munim Shvit and Munim Shabbatot. Although, as I said, thus far, it seems that we're only talking about someone who transgressed the Isur during Shmita. Someone who planted before Shmita, it's not a problem, right? There's this gzera presumably doesn't apply. And then the Yerushalmi goes on. Heach Avida. Yerushalmi is going to bring some nafkaminot. Nata pachot mishloshim yom lifnei shvit v'nichnasa l'shvit. Right, exactly this case. A person plants the tree within 30 days of Shmita. In Teimar, in here is if. Yes? In Teimar Chashad, if you say Chashad, you don't trust people to take Shmita seriously, Enkan Chashad. Enkan Chashad. He didn't do anything wrong. We only say Chashad if someone transgressed something. In Teimar Munin, right, if you explain the issue is the Orla issue, Yeshka, there's an Orla issue. And this line here is exactly what the Ramban and Ritva cite, right? This line here is exactly what the Ramban and Ritva hold. That's the issue. That's what we're talking about. So then the whole Mishnah there is talking about this. Now, on the one hand, just in terms of the analysis of the sugya, on the one hand, it seems like this Yerushalmi really does sound like the Ramban and Ritva, right? It was at least the what? Right, right, exactly. At least the Munim side and this line of Yom, this sounds like this is exactly Ramban and Ritva. That's why the Ritva said, right? I'm just pointing out the Ritva. Where was he? The Ritva here, he said, Ken Muchiach b'furush Yerushalmi. Right, and the Yerushalmi explicates the whole issue. It sounds exactly like that. So it seems like very, very strong proof for Ritva and Ramban, at least if you take the Munim side. But it might be Rashi and Rabbeinu Tam would argue that's exactly the opposite. Why? Because if this is true, the Gemara should have connected this issue, this discussion, with our Mishnah more directly. You see what I'm saying? The Yerushalmi should have said, so if you plant for 30 days before, right? If you plant 30 days before, I have a Mishnah like that, right? Because the Yerushalmi says, well, what's the lashon? In Teimah, right? No, not in Teimah. Sorry. Hachavida nata pachot mishloshim lefnei shviit. It's Gemara. It's Gemara. Yeah. It's Gemara. It's Gemara on the Mishnah of Perek Bet Halakha Aleph in Trumot Bichlal. They should have cited the Mishnah in Shvi'it Perek Bet Mishnah Vav, which is our Mishnah, right? They should have referenced and said, "Oh, which is exactly the Mishnah we learned over there." So in a way, it's hafuch al hafuch. The fact that this Gemara, this Yerushalmi, it sounds exactly like the Ritva and Ramban, right? But that's kind of the problem. It's too on the nose. You know what I'm saying? It's exactly what the Ritva and Ramban were saying, so much so that you have to ask the Yerushalmi, how are you not connecting this to our Mishnah? Unless you say Rashi's right. Right? That's Rashi's. So the Yerushalmi acts both as proof for the Ramban and Ritva, ostensibly. When you think about it a bit more, you realize this Yerushalmi is saying exactly what the Ritva and Ramban are saying. It's too much exactly what the Ritva and Ramban are saying. See what I'm saying? It's too exactly what they're saying. It can't be that that's what the Gemara means. Because had the Gemara meant that, the Gemara would say, oh, and I have a Mishnah like that. It's saying, item chashad and kan chashad, and what, it's okay. But I have a Mishnah against that. Why did the Yerushalmi say? So now I could say what the Ritva and Ramban are saying, which the Mishnah is probably obviously talking about Monim. Says Rashi, Mimela, says Rashi, the whole sugya is only a sugya of Tosefet Shvit. That's our sugya. If there's no Tosefet Shvit, then we have to rediscuss when are you allowed to plant, when are you not. Apart from that, there's an issue of if you plant during Shmita, and if we'll machriya Monim, so it might be that I'll have this same knas that you have to uproot the tree also the month before. But again, it's a totally different reason. It's nothing to do with our Mishnah. And the proof that it's nothing to do with our Mishnah is that the Yerushalmi discusses it so explicitly and doesn't cite our Mishnah. Right? The Ramban Ritva's proof is that the Yerushalmi says exactly what they're saying, and Rashi's proof is that the Yerushalmi is saying exactly what they're saying. It's too strange, so it can't be what we're talking about. No. He'achavida. No, that's the first part. But then he'achavida. You see the end of the second line? Nata pachot mishloshim yom lifnei shvi'it. Shabbatot. That's the orla. Now then he'achavida. Nata pachot mishloshim yom lifnei shvi'it nechazal shvi'it. That's exactly our question, according to Ramban and Ritva. So it says, Ramban and Ritva say it's exactly our question. You see, Yerushalmi is agreeing with us. Says Rashi Afuch. The fact that Yerushalmi is saying exactly what you're saying and doesn't bother saying, I have a Mishnah that actually says what you said, shows the Mishnah cannot mean that. So, right, it's a bit amusing and fuch, but that's it. But that our Mishnah is talking about Sefer Shvit, and this Yerushalmi is talking about the Gzera. So, by the way, the Yerushalmi also cites the opposite case. What happens? What happens if you plant onto Tvav Elul of Shmita? Now, you definitely broke an Isur, but there's no Munim, right? So mitzad chashad, meaning mitzad, people are going to transgress Shmita. I have to be very, very strict with people who transgress Shmita. In that sense, we have to be very strict. Mitzad Munim, there's no minyan. The first year of Shmita will not be, the first year of the tree will not be Shmita, right? Because it's too close to the 8th year already, right? So it's interesting that Yerushalmi is willing to play the game both ways and say maybe even if you transgress Shmita, but there's no Munim issue, it's not a problem, right? So just to sum this up, right? Rashi says the issue is Tosef Shvit. Ridra and Ramban say the issue is the Orla issue, that we keep track of the tree's growth over years, and that's where we're more machmir there. The Yerushalmi seems to be discussing exactly that. What would we do if you planted not during Shemitah, but before Shemitah, so you didn't really break Shemitah, but there is still the Orla issue. And Ridra and Ramban shows that's exactly what we're talking about. Rashi says, right, it's exactly what you're talking about, which proves that it can't be what our Mishnah is talking about, because then the Yerushalmi would connect it to it. Yerushalmi did not connect it to it. Rabbi Time says this whole Mishnah is not an Yisur Shemitah. There's no Yisur on Shemitah. It's all a matter of Orla and not really relevant to the Ma'aseh.